world unique performance of the Stealth Aspies Theatre Company. We are utterly 100% diagnosed autistic adults who came together to tell the stories of other autistic people. Nobody's actually done anything like this before. It's not about being disabled, it's not pity porn, it's not about having some problem or wanting to be not autistic, or what as we call the rest of the world neurotypicals. We are a race and a kind peculiar to ourselves, and we've always been around. We just don't, good for you, brother, we just don't look, sound and act like autistic people are supposed to. And this is kind of like when gay liberation, as it was called in the 70s, first started, or Mary Wollstonecraft started talking a lot of weird stuff about women being self-determining, you know, having the power over contraception and credit facilities, and everyone had a good laugh and thought this was ridiculous. Well, now autistic people are inheriting the conceptual tools and the work that those people have done and are applying it to themselves. Let's start again. For the past 4 years, I've had a show called Gorilla Aspies, where I convert audiences to autism stage by stage with PowerPoint. I wrote a book as well called Gorilla Aspies. My name is Paul Wadey, and I got together everyone last year and I put out a survey on the internet unique to this country. Hillary Clinton had one, but it was a bit crap. Well, that's it. And it's literally a history writer. She suggested to John McDonnell. He said, good idea. So yourself and a woman called Monique Crane co-wrote it. And that's why we have it today. And we'll be getting Janine's extraordinary poems at the end. But now we will begin. Right.
Neurotypical. Not displaying or characterized by neurologically atypical patterns of thought or behavior. So in other words, Donald Trump is a neurotypical.
I've been pretending I was not autistic for 44 years. This is Rebecca. I found out 5 months ago at the age of 44, and this was possibly one of the most traumatic and liberating things that I found out about myself. And it made sense. So now I'm in the now what stage of learning about myself and this thing that defines me, but then it also doesn't. Knowing what I am it's really confusing, but also it's freeing in how I can now see a lot of information to help me cope with the anxiety. The insomnia and anxiety are the worst. The creativity is cool. But the mind ramblings, the fixed need to be right, and the need to have days out a lot is a really big pain. As is working in the normal world with people that seem so rude, but apparently they are normal and I am rude. I hide it at work, but it's really frustrating. And also, I see so many more people now as autistic. Now I have more knowledge about it. Really are everywhere. I pretend I'm not autistic by just being quiet and not interacting much. I hide behind using a computer to communicate and... Sorry, I just got really distracted for a moment with people having a conversation. Sorry about that. I'm going to backtrack a little. I hide it at work, but it's really frustrating. Also, I see so many more people now as autistic. Now that I have more knowledge about it, they really are everywhere. I pretend I'm not autistic by just being quiet and not interacting much. I hide behind using a computer to communicate and rewrite most of my emails with niceties and less brutal truisms. I've been pretending that I was not autistic for 44 years.
Now this is someone called Nick. I have been struggling with severe anxiety, especially social, and depression for quite some time. Never feeling like I could connect with other people. They were so weird and incomprehensible to me. One day, when I was maybe around 40, there was a quiz going around Facebook, which I took, and my score was well into the autism Asperger's range. My first reaction was that it was nonsense and just some silly internet quiz, but I was compelled to do some research. When I did, I realised that I identified quite a lot with what I was reading. Sometime in the next couple of years, I went to an autism clinic that specialised in adult diagnoses and was given a professional diagnosis. It's just who I am. It's not a lack of skill or intelligence, and it's not a surplus either. I just have a different skill set than average. For example, asking me to babysit is like asking an average, non-technical person to please code a mobile app. The latter I could do, easily, even though I never have, but babysitting is completely non-intuitive to me. Before I knew I was autistic, I used to feel like I was a failure as a human being because things that seemed to come naturally to most people were near impossible to me. Things that I struggled to even endure, others didn't even seem to notice. It wasn't until I understood that I was autistic that I realised that other people didn't experience the world the same way I did. Other people are able to filter sensory input so that they're not bombarded with everything at the same intensity. Other people can process real-time speech without a delay so they can keep up with conversations. Other people can fill in information about moods and feelings without even having to think about it, rather than only seeing or hearing what is actually, literally there. I don't necessarily hide it, but I don't really advertise it either. If it becomes an issue, then I will mention it. I spent 40 years trying to be something unnatural to me. It's very draining, and I suffered periods of burnout where I wasn't able to do much of anything. I have better things to spend my energy on now. I'm not really able to pull on an act. All I can do is suppress. My method of pretending is really just being silent and still, which ends up drawing attention anyway. My silence and lack of expression have always stood out as weird to other people, and it's always what people comment on, so it's not a very effective act. I've learned stock responses and small talk. I hate them. But I can use them, however, appropriately when I have to in order to not seem too weird. I cannot, however, do anything beyond that. I can't do spontaneous conversation at all. I don't talk. Well, this is not literally true, as I'm capable of speech, but I can't participate in spontaneous conversations. I can give short answers to questions, but my speech processing time is so long, it's just easier for me, to not talk. Occasionally, a certain topic might come up, which I will talk about well beyond what others are interested in. I've been told I either don't talk at all or I don't stop. Since I'm now aware that the latter is annoying, I tend to default to not talking at all. I tend to put everyone else's comfort above my own, so I feel like I compromise quite a lot. It's very hard for me to ask for accommodations. I'm embarrassed that it's so difficult for me to handle things that don't bother other people. So I just shut off instead of saying anything. I've always tried to be as invisible as possible. I felt like I was broken and weak. I thought that everyone experienced the world like I did, and they were just somehow stronger and better able to cope than I was. It didn't help that my former stepdad treated me as if this were true. At this point in my life, I am done pretending to be something I'm not. I will choose to be poor rather than expending significant energy faking it just to have a little more money and then not be able to enjoy life anyway. It was very difficult pretending I was not autistic. I was ashamed that I was perceived as weird. No matter how hard I tried to be normal, I pushed myself to do things that were insanely difficult for me because other people did them with little effort, and I didn't want to be seen as weak or lazy. I did nothing but work and sleep because I had no energy for anything else, and then my life felt pointless. I would never suggest that someone try to do neurotypical. Typical does not equal better. At best, it equals average. However, I find that if I practice proper self-care, including eating properly, sleeping enough, without being so overwhelmed that it causes a disturbance. Thank you.
I'm afraid to be alone, but I don't trust people. I'm afraid to do nothing, but trying exhausts me beyond belief. I'm afraid of peace, but I'm disturbed by bustle. I'm afraid to die, but I'm petrified of life. I'm afraid of myself, but wouldn't be anyone else for all of the solar systems and galaxies in existence. I'm afraid to bear children, but I could cry to think that I might not procreate. So that was the essence of me. Thank you for your indulgence. Thanks. The next one is actually a bit more cheerful, I suppose. When I was a teenager, I was mystified by, well, other humans, that goes without saying, but love and relationships and things like that. It's quite a big thing for a teenage girl. It's also a little bit of a minefield. So this poem is called Barbie and Ken. It's quite short. Star-crossed lovers, shooting stars, hearts and flowers, Venus, Mars. Barbie and Ken, they've got it right. They're made of plastic, so they never fight. Barbie's all glossy with perfect tits. Ken can't use it for sex, he's got no bits. They've got no guilt, because they've got no brains. On their parade it never rains. On their parade it never rains. It was really short.
Good. We're decent folk. Don't tell us to do good. We pay our rates of several £1,000s for no autistics in our neighbourhood. You'd say the same in our shoes, yes you would. Our need to circle wagons is profound. We'd stop them moving in here if we could. We want our so-called reasons understood. When we think of them, we're sure they will be sound. For no autistics in our neighbourhood. Small minds made up and hostile ground is stood. Our empathy is lost, our coldness found. We'd stop them moving in here if we could. Perhaps we'll wear a white robe and a hood. Let loose the NIMBYs and their baying hound. Bark no autistics in our neighbourhood. We stop them moving in because we could. Thank you very much. I'm never caught in the crossfire of banter without a retort. Fit me a filter to sift out distraction, teach me a trick to predict a reaction, create me a coat like the back of a duck so that nothing will stick if they throw enough muck. Install me a switch that can switch off my thinking, considering, probing, deciphering, linking, at least fit a dimmer or a slow-mo or pause that can turn down the volume or close all the doors. Give me that gift that they call inhibition, so I know when to hush and reserve my position. Program an app that decodes all the crap, build me a bridge across the processing gap. Alternatively, Make me a world where not every place is buzzing with noise and invading my space. Set up society so you can converse and I can obsess and neither is worse. Where statements are clear and where reasoning's sound. Where some holes are square because not all pegs are round. Where life on the spectrum is not to be feared. Diversity is normal and no one is weird. Ditch the requirement that all must conform, broaden our meaning of what is the norm, change the arrangements, compete rather less, cooperate more, reimagine success, where a living's a right, not a gift or a perk, where we're working to live, we're not living to work, where skills are acknowledged and talents are freed, from each by ability, to each by need. Design a fresh start, where there's room to relax, to think, to create, to heal up the cracks, agree some new rules so we all can control our workplaces, life spaces, world as a whole. A future where fear, hate and bullying stop. A system where people, not profit, come top. Surely this isn't too much that I ask. But until we achieve it, please make me that mask. Thank you very much.
I was 16 and attending college when I was sent to the educational psychologist for evaluation. I found out then I'm fine with being autistic, although sometimes it can be a bit isolating. I wish there was more understanding and knowledge from people. I never really felt the need to hide my autism or my nature. Even if I don't tell people I'm autistic, I still express my traits openly. I don't pretend I'm not autistic. I don't see the need to, and I don't even know how to. I am autistic. It's who I am, 24/7. That cannot be changed. I can act sometimes as if I'm not autistic by communicating and socialising more with other people rather than sticking to my own routine and avoiding contact. But often I don't make eye contact and I stim a lot. This happens every time I communicate with people. People never call me out on it or criticise me for it. I compromise by leaving my comfort zone to spend time with neurotypicals and sometimes do activities I wouldn't normally do, i.e. sports, holidays.
Eyesight is a little shot in this light. I shall do my best. This is a PhD medical student and a female, and she's anonymous, so I won't share her name. I was 24 and a computer science PhD student when I discovered I was on the spectrum. I started having panic attacks the summer before my 24th birthday, and over the following couple of months descended into severe depression. I eventually went to my GP, who after months of getting nowhere persuaded me to see a counsellor, who noted that I wouldn't look her in the eye and said, "What do you know about Asperger's syndrome?" She followed this up with, "But I don't know. I mean, you obviously have a sense of humour and you're not meant to if you're on the spectrum." Yes, sorry, that was a deliberate silence. the sense of being pulled. The key to a good joke is never explain it. I was offended because all I had been told about ASD was that autistic people don't realise that other people have feelings. This, and the humour thing, made me sure that I could not be autistic. Au contraire. I went home and did some Google searching and discovered that actually those things are myths, and it was obvious that I have Asperger's right from the start. I mentioned this to my GP at my next appointment and she immediately referred me for diagnosis. I was officially diagnosed about 5 months later, at the age of 25. I want the world to know that autistic people, A, have feelings, B, can empathise, C, care about other people. I also wish that autism were not understood as primarily a social and or communication disorder with sensory processing weirdnesses, as a side note, but rather a sensory processing difference that has social/communication side effects. I have to hide it, and I have done since I was diagnosed almost 2 years ago. I'm a medical student, and due to the autistic people can't feel empathy, and autistic people don't like people myths, it would hurt my career if people made those assumptions about me. My immediate family and one of my best friends knows. The other one just said, "Oh, you're not medically weird, you're just normally weird," when I tried to tell her, so I didn't mention it again, and I don't know whether she really registered it. But that's it. I pretend I'm neurotypical with difficulty. It takes a lot of energy. For years, it's also used energy that I turned against myself as I tried to experience the world the way I was told I should. Tried to find the sensory and emotional and physiological responses in myself that I was told I was having when they're not there, and deny the ones that are. Now at least I can understand and focus all my energy on passing in public. I don't have to pretend when I'm at home alone. I try to act normal in public and suppress more obvious stims, although sometimes they get through if I'm not paying attention. I make excuses like I have an appointment to explain why I can't do things, instead of being able to say, I'm completely overwhelmed by processing sensory input and need to go home and shut myself away until I've recovered. I tell people I have a migraine instead of saying I'm having an autistic shutdown. I pretend that things don't hurt my senses when they do. I fake enthusiasm for things I don't care about or that scare me, because that's a normal response. I claim reactions to things that I don't experience. I nod along and pretend to understand when actually I have no idea what's going on.
In case you're wondering, I came in a bit of money from my father, which is how I ended up with an iPad Pro. It's very impressive.
Oh, a little bit of money from you.
A little bit of money.
Not a large bit.
Well, it all went on this. Which would probably get dropped out the back of a bus.
And not even a good iPad, was it?
Oh, well, that's a good point, actually. It is a very good iPad, I'll have you know. Trappings of the bourgeois, yeah. This is a fellow called Malcolm. I found out shortly after my 41st birthday. I had to chase the diagnosis myself. The GP's practice has never dealt with an adult diagnosis before, and they didn't know where to send me. I had to source it for them. I don't know what typical is like, so it is difficult to give a comparison. I know I prefer a lot more peace and quiet than my work colleagues. I can feel quite lonely despite being surrounded by folk, as I often feel I have no connection with them. Throughout my life, I have had difficulty making friends. Many acquaintances and folk I know, but not really friends as such. But then again, what exactly is a friend? Due to the nature of my job, I tend not to reveal my Asperger's, as there is still a great misunderstanding about it, and I think it would affect how my patients see me. I never pretend not to be autistic. I'm just myself, though I do have to adopt some strategies with my communication. I have to consciously be aware if I'm talking too much or not allowing others to talk. It's a trait I share, by the way, except I don't really have the awareness, I just tend to talk. Anyone going to argue? No. This is the only time I've acknowledged it. I'm not sure I can totally act as if I'm neurotypical, yes, no. I like to think I can. I think those who do not know my diagnosis just think I'm a bit focused and intense at times. Brisk and forceful are other words associated with me. Got so much in common with this. I have a lack of close friends, and other than my wife, no real social life, no clubs or societies, no friendly invites out for a drink. I compromise myself hugely around neurotypicals. I have to tolerate very chatty work colleagues whom I just want to scream, "Shut up!" at. The difficulty of not saying, "How can you not understand it simple?" when I can see 100 solutions they want to put in, but what seems like hundreds of what-ifs and buts into the problem. Really simple. When I did not know about my Asperger's, I just felt I was pursuing my own path. I was a bit individual.
really hit home was when exploring the possibility of Asperger's, reading a paragraph in a Tony Attwood book that summed up my entire childhood. I had thought I was unique, that I was me, and suddenly I was a stereotype. I feel no pressure being autistic. It is part of me. I accept it. The issue is more the reverse, getting folk to accept that I actually have a diagnosis. How can you have Asperger's? You have a degree and a job. Thank you.
I was 46 when I found out. I had long believed I was somewhere on the AS spectrum, but I realised after reading that my sensory acuity was consistent with Asperger's. So I sought a diagnosis via my GP. I periodically hide my autism when it is pragmatically useful for me to do so, such as at first job interviews. I do it more deliberately now than I used to. Before diagnosis, I tried to be typical. Now I just pretend to be typical. I do that same thing. Model neurotypical behaviour and say and do things that are not me. Sometimes I decide to emphasise Sometimes I decide to hide my autism when it works for me, when there is a sympathetic power that can help. Sometimes I decide to hide it when it would show me as vulnerable and give advantage to others. When I am in company, when I am socialising, I can get very tired in company and will leave it. I also verbally stim and tick when anxious. I also become more liberal and supposedly pedantic when anxious or tired. People are sometimes curious, but they eventually devalue what I am saying because they think it's the condition speaking and not the whole person. I compromise myself less and less since diagnosis. I am reclaiming my way of being. The world often has little compassion for me, so I give it to myself by compromising less. And before I knew, I was incomplete, out of place, awkward, unhappy. I handled it all by drinking to excess. If someone is creating overstimulus, sometimes I can say to them I am autistic and ask them to stop, and sometimes I can't. I'm too tired or frightened to ask sometimes. I would advise other Aspies that it's okay to remain quiet or silent. Move away from overstimulus deliberately rather than flinching.
One of the many anonymous responses is by a woman who is a medical student. I found out... Whoa! Sudden moments of drama there, fans of action and adventure. We tried to put a few stunts in the show. And all I could figure was... It was originally meant to hit the ceiling and go down, but I just dropped it. So... Watch the pad. Watch the pad. I found out what I was at the age of 35. I was referred by a mainstream psychologist due to my intense and rigid thinking and immovable grief following a dark time in my life. I have become proud of being autistic, but I sometimes wish I didn't seem different and constantly get heckled in the street or spoken to like a child. I have had to hide it from my family since diagnosis, as they are elderly and will find it distressing. I don't pretend I am not on the spectrum, especially when around my elderly parents, but I do not always disclose to people. I am choosy about when I do this. I basically have to hide being autistic all of the time. I can't be honest about being autistic. I am required to disclose my autism to the medical school, but beyond that, I can't display any autistic behaviour or I risk being kicked out. I just have to keep my head down and survive somehow. I can make small talk and eye contact. I just get very tired if I have to sustain it. I tire very easily in interaction with others and struggle to think of things to say to get into a conversation. I always feel that everyone else in the room has more in common with each other than any of them have with me. I often keep on going when I am too tired and really need to stop and have recovery time. To be honest, I find it just as stressful being around other autistic people. Sometimes more so, as I feel I'm under even more pressure to get it right with them, otherwise I've betrayed the tribe. Before I knew I was autistic, I thought I was a failure of a human being. I blamed myself for my social isolation. I was embarrassed by myself. I became depressed. Before I knew, I was much lonelier because I didn't have my online group of ASD friends, with whom I am in daily touch and whom I adore. I also frequently burned out from mental overexposure because I wasn't aware of my condition. I thought I might have type 2 bipolar because I would have brief periods indulging in my natural exuberance and enthusiasm for doing things and being social, but then crash and be depressed and exhausted for weeks. Since I've known I'm autistic and managed my input levels better, I have avoided this happening. Unfortunately, I would say to my fellow Aspies, do not disclose to people who are not your very close friends. Autism is misunderstood by the general public, and it is easier to go along being thought of as a bit weird or shy than it is carrying the burden of myths that go along with being known to be autistic. And I'm not kidding, a man like myself and all of us can completely relate with that experience and all the experiences. Thank you.
Hi. I'm actually going to share a few words of my own, not someone else's. So I got my diagnosis at the age of 38. Oh God, I'm going to have to actually admit how old I am now. Oh, it's cool. I'm 40 and I'm proud of it. It's fine. Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's cool. So when I was a kid, I was really into words. Actually, I'm really into words now as well. And I wrote a lot of poems, really a lot. And I never really shared them with anyone because I thought they were traditional, angsty, girly, teenage poems. And my mum said they were good, and that's just a sign you never, yeah, I didn't want to share them with anyone. Interestingly, my mum's also on the spectrum, we found out recently, so I kind of see why she got them. Anyway, this one sort of sums up how I was as a very anxious kid, using my own words. It's called The Essence of Me, I'm Afraid. I promise the one after is a little more cheerful. I'm afraid to be alone, but I don't trust people. I'm afraid to do nothing, but trying exhausts me beyond belief. I'm afraid of peace, but I'm disturbed by bustle. I'm afraid to die, but I'm petrified of life. I'm afraid of myself, but wouldn't be anyone else for all of the solar systems and galaxies in existence. I'm afraid to bear children, but I could cry to think that I might not procreate. So that was the essence of me. Thank you, your indulgence. Thanks. So the next one is actually a bit more cheerful, I suppose. When I was a teenager, I was mystified by, well, other humans, but that goes without saying. Love and relationships and things like that. It's quite a big thing for a teenage girl. It's also a little bit of a minefield. So this poem is called Barbie and Ken. It's quite short. Star-crossed lovers, shooting stars, hearts and flowers, Venus, Mars, Barbie and Ken, They've got it right. They're made of plastic, so they never fight. Barbie's all glossy with perfect tits. Ken can't use her for sex, he's got no bits. They've got no guilt, because they've got no brains. On their parade it never rains. On their parade it never rains. It was really short. We turned it into a punk song a few years later, and a friend of mine added a verse, but it totally didn't work for me, so I'm not going to share it with you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to shoot a few poems at you now, and if anyone wants to object, you can just fuck off. No, seriously. Thanks for sticking about listening to us so far. So this is me and my poems, and this first one is called Snakes Inside My Ears. I get snakes inside my ears and bursting blisters on my brain. I'm zoning in and zoning out, my thoughts all spinning everywhere. Through a glass wall, I try to hear you, but it's hard to understand the people speaking to me, talking to me, total overload. I'm zoning in and zoning out, my thoughts all spinning everywhere. All conversation is frustration, and I'm struggling to connect with people speaking to me, talking to me, total overload with random thoughts, creative impulses exploding in my skull. All conversation is frustration, and I'm struggling to connect. I have to focus, pay attention to the voices all around with random thoughts, creative impulses exploding in my skull, and hissing snakes with angry bites injecting venom in my ears. I have to focus, pay attention to the voices all around. The people play a social game in which it's tricky to keep up with hissing snakes with angry bites injecting venom in my ears, eroding all my confidence, distracting me with rage and doubt. The people play a social game in which it's tricky to keep up. I can't suppress these inner demons because I hear them all the time, eroding all my confidence, distracting me with rage and doubt. The stinging lectures of my aunts that reek of words that stank of truth. I can't suppress these inner demons because I hear them all the time, the taunting bullies in the playground, shouty teachers in the class, the stinging lectures of my aunts that reeked of words that stank of truth. The friends I've hurt, the loves I've spurned, all pull me deep inside myself. The taunting bullies in the playground, shouty teachers in the class, the scattered fragments of the past that are embedded in my mind. The friends I've hurt, the loves I've spurned, all pull me deep inside myself, or soon they merge into a matrix of creation and ideas. The scattered fragments of the past that are embedded in my mind. These vivid images so sharp they prick my conscience, stir my thoughts, for soon they merge into a matrix of creation and ideas I can't contain. I'm stretching, screaming as they struggle to escape. The vivid images so sharply prick my conscience, stir my thoughts. The superheroes, evil villains, pretty damsels, wise old men, I can't contain them, stretching, screaming as they struggle to escape. Rampaging armies, squabbling politicians, suffering innocents. The superheroes, evil villains, pretty damsels, wise old men. I make up stories in my dreams. My fantasies are brought to life. Rampaging armies, squabbling politicians, suffering innocents burst out of me and take the shape and form of words, and with these words I make up stories in my dreams. My fantasies are brought to life in plays and poetry. Haikus, sestinas, sonnets, songs burst out of me and take the shape and form of words, and with these words I speak the truth. I am alive, I live for this, performing words in plays and poetry. Pantoums, haikus, sestinas, sonnets, songs, I am complete, yet so alone. Imagination rules my world, I speak the truth. I am alive, I live for this, performing words, because I'm itching to create, cut loose and let the demons out. I am complete, yet so alone. Imagination rules my world. Through a glass wall I try to hear you, but it's hard to understand because I'm itching to create, cut loose and let the demons out. See, I've got snakes inside my ears and bursting blisters on my brain. Cheers. I'll shoot one more at you, then we're going to have Jenny up, and this piece is called Falling Forward. When we are young, some of us say, when I grow up, I want to be an actor. I want to be a singer. I want to be a painter. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to inspire. I want to create. I want to be an artist. Now other people say, that's all well and good, but you need something to fall back on. So fall back. Fall back on your education, fall back on your job, fall back on the sympathy of all your friends and family, fall back on charity, fall back on the dole, fall back on the insecurity eating away at your soul, fall back on hesitation, fall back on procrastination, fall back on frustration, fall back on never working hard enough, fall back on the fact that you're just not good enough, fall back on mediocrity, fall back on misery, fall back on disillusion, fall back on confusion about who you really are, fall back on lazy, wild notions about being a superstar, fall back on the truth that being an artist is not about being famous, even for the famous. It's about finding and creating work for yourself and other artists. There's this myth about being an artist created by the media. It's that either you are famous or you are nothing. That unless you're a celebrity, you don't count for anything. That's a fallacy, a distortion. This is the truth of a real artist situation. It's not the fame, but the process of artistic creation. That's the real reason we do what we do. This is how we connect to the world around us. This is how we live, through our art. So if you're prepared to accept this reality, if this is who you are, if this really is your destiny, don't fall back, fall forward. Fall forward on your passion, fall forward in your ambition, fall forward, embrace your artistic condition, fall forward to stay alive, fall forward on anything it takes to survive, fall forward on your failures as well as your successes, fall forward on your own terms and no one else's, fall forward on your face, fall forward in embarrassment, fall forward in disgrace, because when you try to avoid failure, you are going to fail. If you try to avoid disappointment, you are going to be disappointed, because failure and disappointment screw us all up in life, no matter what path we take. And if you haven't suffered, you will. So you can either suffer or screw yourself up inside through being too afraid to suffer. The only way to move forward is to risk falling forward. So don't fall back, fall forward and keep on rising, keep on learning, keep on walking forward. Cheers, thank you.
Fantastic. This poem isn't about any of you. Tell you what usually happens when I ask that. What usually happens is one person puts their hand up and I immediately destroy their self-image by pointing out that because they're the only person who's put their hand up, they can't possibly be normal. But there you go. This is called being normal. Normal works from 9 to 5. Normal wants to learn to drive. Normal never thinks aloud. Normal blends into the crowd. Normal laughs at normal jokes. Normal hangs out with the blokes. Normal's reading normal books. Normal sticks to normal looks. Normal isn't weird or strange. Normal sees no need for change. Normal's aspirational, non-denominational. Norman's normal, that's okay. Ava's average, come what may, but Zeke's a freak and Toddy's odd and Jane's a punishment from God. Normal's limbs all work just fine. Normal sits with neutral spine. Normal's straight in every sense. Normal sitting on the fence. Normal's happy with his gender. Normal man is none too tender. Normal woman not too tough, but normal isn't good enough. So normal craves success and fame. Normal isn't quite the same for women as it is for men. Normal goes to bed at 10. Normal's hers and normal's his. Normal's what it says it is. Normal thinks how normal should. Normal thinks that normal's good. Normal keeps you in and cool. Keeps you safe from ridicule. Because normal folks are never cruel to fellow normals, as a rule. Normal's neither thin nor fat. Who the fuck decided that? Is this definition formal? Who determines what is normal? Normal tricked and normal lied. I couldn't be normal if I tried. Thank you very much. 10th of October or something, someone said to me, Janine, you should write a poem to help raise mental health awareness. So I said, okay, and I did. And I called it, Get a Fucking Grip! That seems to sum it up really. Snap out of it! Snap out of taking orders. Snap out of blame. Snap out of disorders. Snap out of shame. Snap out of austerity. snap out of stressors, snap out of poverty, snap out of pressures, snap out of raising awareness and start raising hell. This system's sick, it isn't well. Get a fucking grip. Clench your fists and bite your lip. Never let your clown face slip. Get a grip of broken minds and ask yourself what's breaking them. Get a grip of that banner pole and that placard stick. Stop the traffic, shout and kick. Take my tip, get a grip. Calm down! And chill out. Never spit your pill out. Chin up, man up, pull everything you can up. Put your hand up, make your point and stand up. Pull yourself together. Pull your allies together, pull your demands together, pull your hands and arms together. Pull together all our resources, our battling and campaigning forces. Solidarity forever. Pull ourselves together. A poem about Swindon, would you believe that? So the poem's not about Swindon, it's about something really annoying that happened in Swindon. Which is that there was a plan to open supported accommodation, to take over a house on the street in Swindon and use it for supported accommodation for autistic adults to live independent lives in the community. And guess what? The people who lived on the street were not having this, not in their backyards, and they staged some NIMBY protests about how the value of their houses would go down if these weirdos moved in, and they won. And the home was refused planning permission, and it really pissed me off. So I wrote a poem about it, called No Autistics Here. It's what's called a villanelle. So Alan listed a lot of poem types in his poem, didn't he? I'm not sure whether villanelles got a mention, but I like villanelles. I could possibly explain to you how the structure of them works, but it sounds really complicated more than it actually is. The most commonly known one is Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Dark Night, if anyone's heard that. But basically the point is it repeats lines. And the reason I needed to tell you this, it isn't because you're really interested in different forms of poem, but because I wanted to ensure you knew that if I repeated lines, it wasn't because I was too fucking idle to write any new ones. That it's actually the requirement of the poetic form called the villanelle, which has 19 lines, and here they go. It's called No Autistics Here. No autistics in our neighbourhood. We just don't want those weirdo freaks around. We'd stop them moving in here if we could. We're decent folk. Don't tell us to do good. We pay our rates of several £1,000s for no autistics in our neighbourhood. You'd say the same in our shoes. Yes, you would. Our need to circle wagons is profound. We'd stop them moving in here if we could. We want our so-called reasons understood. When we think of them, we're sure they will be sound. For no autistics in our neighbourhood. Small minds made up and hostile ground is stood. Our empathy is lost, our coldness found. We'd stop them moving in here if we could. Perhaps we'll wear a white robe and a hood. Let loose the NIMBYs and their baying hound. Bark no autistics in our neighbourhood. We stop them moving in because we could. Thank you very much. So, I do write a lot of poems and I perform a lot of poetry, not always about being autistic. If you look at my website, JanineBooth.com, then you can see lots of examples there. Most recently I wrote one about Henry Bolton from UKIP. He's been having a bit of trouble lately. I won't tell you the whole poem, I'll just tell you it starts with the lines, I was flirting with a racist in a cocktail bar when I met you.
Very good.
Yeah. Actually, on the subject of bashing right-wingers, let me do a completely not related to autism one about Boris Johnson, because it makes me laugh and it makes you laugh. A while ago, a year and a bit ago, there was a debate in Parliament about Saudi Arabia, and an MP asked Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, that sounds a bit wrong, doesn't it, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, why Britain still sold arms to Saudi Arabia despite human rights abuses, the war against Yemen, etc. And he gave the most morally vacuous answer you could possibly imagine. He said, Britain sells arms to Saudi Arabia because if we didn't, then another country would. So I wrote this brief poetic response. Boris arms the Saudis, they use those arms to kill. He says if we don't do it, another country will. So next time I see Boris, his nuts will meet my knee. And if I get arrested, then this will be my plea. Oh, officer, I claim my act was for the greater good. And if I hadn't done it, some other fucker would. Deliberate, this one. He sits on the benches at front. It would, inter alia, insult female genitalia to call him a violatory cunt. Concise to the point. Okay. Yeah. I've got off topic now, haven't I? I'm supposed to be doing poems about being autistic.
Well, you are. You're being autistic.
Being autistic and hating Tories. That's my autistic obsession is hating Tories. It's amazing. We've been talking about autism for how long now? About 45 minutes?
Never long enough.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No one has said and no one has asked what causes that then. That's amazing, isn't it? Usually you get on.
I was thinking it though.
Well, you're all thinking it, yeah. Yeah, you're all thinking, what's caused that then?
Parents.
Yeah, what's caused that?
Too shy.
It was God, apparently, or something. Something like that. There are all sorts of reasons, strange views about reasons, so I thought I'd write a poem about it. It's called Causes. Caused by what fours and closed doors, something's up on the upper floors, down on all fours, trying to find an explanation, must be caused by vaccination, not so innocent inoculation, caused by flaws or some mutation, looking for an insanity clause, looking for an injury claim, looking for something or someone to blame, caused by excess testosterone, progesterone or factors unknown, fertiliser, pesticides, the answer hides in the old grey matter, must be mad as a hatter, holding a mystery in my lobes. The charity detectives are sure they can solve this puzzle, enigma, embarrassment, stigma. Who is going to make the breakthrough? Who is going to remake you? We can surely find a cure if only you'll donate some more. Relentless pursuit of a pill to prevent us. Until then, resent us. It's systemic, endemic, seems to be an epidemic. This week's good cause for rattling tins, atonement for our previous sins, caused by karma, caused by some prenatal drama. Kirsten never blessed us. These things are sent to test us. Causes embarrassment, discomfort, shame, causes anguish society to rethink again, causes people to look away, don't know what to do or say, no one would want to be this way. Put in a category, marked tragedy, unsatisfactory. Do you need a label or are we just unstable? Marked from behind masks, with stains and strains. Nobody ever asks what causes normal brains. This is another one about a terrible incident of bigotry, even worse than the one in Swindon. This one was in some town somewhere near Barnsley, I think. 2012, something like that. Anyway, young fellow by the name of Stephen Simpson's 18 years old. He was gay, he was autistic, he had a flat warming party, some lads gate crashed it, and they escalated from teasing him to stripping him, writing gay boy on his body, writing I love dick on his body, and then they poured oil on his genitals and set fire to it and ran away. And the following morning he died of his injuries. And the ringleader of this, a lad called Jordan Sheard, got 3.5 years for manslaughter after his barrister successfully argued that what happened was just horseplay. It was a stupid game that went wrong in a bad way, and the appeal failed as well. And myself and some others were involved in some campaigning around this at the time. So I wrote this poem, and the poem is about someone, me possibly, who gate crashes a party held by the local judge, and things go a bit shit, but hey, it was just horseplay. So this is called Horseplay. I heard the local judge was having a party around his flat. I thought that sounded tasty. I'll have a bit of that. There'll probably be some posh nosh and a bit of legal chat. I hadn't been invited, but who cares about that? So a gate crashed his little soiree, sipped champers in the tub. Natter with the legal types got stuck into the grub. It certainly beat another night down my dingy local pub, but then things got a bit out of hand, and therein lies the rub. I was talking with His Honour. He seemed a decent sort, regaling us with stories of happy days in court, but then he got onto a case which left me so distraught. A young lad's murder was horseplay, or so the scumbag thought. If puffs and weirdos must have parties, what do they expect? When normal people turn up, they're certain to object. The sentence is quite reasonable, no need to redirect. A couple of years inside, a short time to reflect. So I thought I'd have some horseplay, and tore off his wig and gown, scrawled "Judge Boy" on his body, and "I like sending people down," doused him with oil and champers and set light to the clown, then ran away while others tried to smother the flames down. Didn't mean to kill him. It was good-natured horseplay. My barrister says it was a stupid game that went wrong in a bad way. So I think I'll be all right in court, get a shortish prison stay, and unlike my poor victim, get to party again someday. Thank you very much. But before I do, I should remind you, you can look at my website if you want. I also have some books. I have some books, poems. And I also have a serious book, which is a guide to making your workplace autism friendly. So that's useful if you are an autistic worker, a friend of an autistic worker, a trade union activist, like I am myself. Should find that very handy. I've got a few copies with me if anyone wants to grab me afterwards. So Paul at the beginning mentioned my involvement in the Labour Party manifesto on autism and neurodiversity. You can find that on the internet as well. It's all very exciting. But this poem I'm going to finish on is like a bit of a personal manifesto. So it's a bit like our football match is a game of two halves. Unless, like me, you're a Peterborough United supporter, in which case both the halves were shit yesterday and we lost 5-1, but there you go. It was Leicester City, they are good. But this is a poem with two halves. So the first half is about how you might survive, as the things you do to survive as an autistic person in a autism hostile society. So I think it sounds a little bit like some of those testimonies we were hearing before. And the second half is more of a kind of, well, look, this is how we can change the world so that we don't have to pursue all those tactics and stuff. So it's called Make Me a Mask. No, it's not. It's called Manifesto from Behind the Mask. It's the first line is Make Me a Mask. Giving it away already. Make me a mask, so that no one can see that the face that I'm wearing is not really me. Get me a glaze to go over my eyes so it looks like I'm looking while I'm melting inside. Fetch me some specs that can read between lines. Fit me antennae to pick up the signs. Lend me a lens that reads unwritten rules. Bless me with patience to help suffer fools. Find me a babelfish trained to translate the looks and the hints and the traps and the bait. Arm me with ammo so I'm never caught in the crossfire of banter without a retort. fit me a filter to sift out distraction, teach me a trick to predict a reaction, create me a coat like the back of a duck, store me a switch that can switch off my thinking, considering, probing, deciphering, linking, at least fit a dimmer or a slow-mo or pause that can turn down the volume or close all the doors. Give me that gift that they call inhibition, so I know when to hush and reserve my position. Program an app that decodes all the crap. Build me a bridge across the processing gap. Alternatively, make me a world where reasoning's sound, where some holes are square, because not all pegs are round. Where life on the spectrum is not to be feared, diversity is normal and no one is weird. Ditch the requirement that all must conform, broaden our meaning of what is the norm, change the arrangements, compete rather less, cooperate more, reimagine success, where a living's a right, not a gift or a perk, where we're working.
I've become proud of being autistic, but I sometimes wish I didn't seem different and constantly get heckled in the street or spoken to like a child. I have had to hide it from my family since diagnosis, as they are elderly and will find it distressing. I don't pretend I am not on the spectrum, especially when around my elderly parents, but I do not always disclose to people. I am choosy about when I do this. I basically have to hide being autistic all of the time. I can't be honest about being autistic. I am required to disclose my autism to the medical school, but beyond that, I can't display any autistic behaviour or I risk being kicked out. I just have to keep my head down and survive somehow. I can make small talk and eye contact. I just get very tired if I have to sustain it. I tire very easily in interaction with others and struggle to think of things to say to get into a conversation. I always feel that everyone else in the room has more in common with each other than any of them have with me. I often keep on going when I am too tired and really need to stop and have recovery time. To be honest, I find it just as stressful being around other autistic people. Sometimes more so, as I feel I'm under even more pressure to get it right with them, otherwise I have betrayed the tribe. Before I knew I was autistic, I thought I was a failure of a human being. I blamed myself for my social isolation. I was embarrassed by myself. I became depressed. Before I knew, I was much lonelier because I didn't have my online group of ASD friends.